let me introduce tonight's topic and tonight's webinar. Presenter is exploring the HOS Playbook, strategies and supporting pets and people and pets. And I will just say one quick word about this. This tool is a transformational tool for you and your organization. And if and I'm sure you will believe me at the end of this presentation, but it is, I think, going to be one of those tools that we look back and say, wow, that really transformed things within a lot of different agencies. Here presenting tonight is Eliza Torres, the Maddie's Education and Implementation Manager, who I have the distinct pleasure of working with and is just a very informed and very well prepared speaker. So, with that, I'm going to turn off my camera, and Eliza, the floor is now yours.
Thank you so much, Vincent, and thank you everyone for coming today. So I'm Eliza Torres. Just a little bit of background on me. So I started my animal welfare career at Austin Pets Alive and the foster placement team, finding foster placement for at-risk dogs across Central Texas. And as many people in animal welfare do, wearing many hats, doing vaccines, microchips, tube feeding, the whole nine. I have been in the volunteer/animal advocacy space since about 2004, and I officially joined HOS in 2021. So I've been here about 3 years. Prior to working with animals, I served in leadership roles across small local businesses, major retail chains, and legal services, all with a focus on internal structure and process improvement. And generally, you can find me staring longingly at just about any animal I come across. So before we discuss the HOS Playbook itself, I wanted to share some of the background and stepping stones that got us to a place where we could create the playbook at all. For those of you who have been following HOS for a while, you might know some of this information, but HOS launched the beginning of the pandemic 2020 with this goal of bringing industry leaders and community members together to tackle the core challenges in animal sheltering. And eventually it led to creating this community-oriented sheltering approach that supports people and pets. And we continue this work through collaborating with pilot shelters, small project groups. We do data collection, research, direct program implementation, and we're always focusing on two main points, which is engaging with the community and reimagining the industry's traditional shelter-first model. So our playbook and everything that we do at HOS is based around 4 core pathways and a few supporting elements. And so our 4 core pathways are pet support services, assisting people and pets in need, lost pet reunification, pretty self-explanatory, supported self-rehoming, so enabling the community to participate in the process of finding new homes for pets without having to enter the shelter at all, and then intake to placement, where we are finding paths for pets who are about to come into the shelter, who have come into the shelter for positive outcomes. And some of the supporting elements you can see along here at the bottom, we have role of the facility, field services, customer service, case management, foster-centric model, community partnerships, volunteer integration. We have a lot of different aspects that all feed into these 4 main core pathways that lead all of our work. And so, as you can see, the pathways and all of our supporting elements work together to create this comprehensive approach to supporting the community and implementing programs to create positive pathways and outcomes for pets. So the community is always at the center, and all of these things are working together to create a holistic model. In addition to the community being at the center, the HOS model focuses on a few different things, more pets being housed in foster homes, more reunification of lost pets, the rehoming aspect, providing support to people and pets facing complex challenges, less unnecessary separation of families, unnecessary surrender. And with all of that, the shelter facility itself can evolve from primarily housing pets to include many points of service to better support communities. So this graphic here that you're seeing is just all the different things that could be integrated into the HOS facility of the future to better support communities. So with all of that, what is the HOS Playbook? At its core, the HOS Playbook is a data-informed, comprehensive collection of guides created to support program implementation and address the major challenges facing both animal welfare and the communities that they serve. And we created the HOS Playbook for two main reasons. The standalone HOS toolkits and data insights and everything that we have on our website have always been free and available to access in our library of resources, but lacked the ability for custom recommendations. And also, we wanted to create a comprehensive, scalable way for organizations to implement programs in a multi-subject approach and also all in one place. So you might be asking, will the playbook work for our organization? We recognize that every organization is different, every community is different. And so this playbook is really a set of guidelines that you can use and adjust to make it work for you. Many of our resources were built as a result of collaborative efforts that might have been with our HOS pilot shelters, our partners, working groups, job alikes, and industry professionals in the human and animal welfare spaces, both in the US and internationally. And on top of that, prior to our launch, the playbook was tested by HOS partners, which all differed in where they were at, their size, their intake. There was a mix of private and municipal operations. And with those testing individuals, their feedback was used to improve the content and make sure that it was really usable by a wide variety of organizations and support services. So the playbook has four main components. Quick start guides, which are starting from scratch or expanding on existing operations. There are various options to supporting different levels of your organization based on what your available resources are. We focus on data tracking and goal setting considerations, which are built into each of our sections. There is a research component, so supporting research is integrated into each guide to support implementation efforts and advocacy if research is available. And then the big one is custom results. So these optional self-assessments that we created provide custom recommendations based on what your organization is currently doing. So just to deep dive a little bit further in these quick start guides, each quick start guide has a little bit of a mix of a content overview, step-by-step instructions, or recommendations by subcategory, technology considerations, personnel considerations, samples for all of that if they are available, and additional ways to further expand programming if you already have the base level in place. And from the data aspect, all of our data considerations have data entry best practices, sample data points and definitions when available, the benefit of tracking specific data points, and additional ways to collect data both internally and externally if you use a service that collects data for you, how to get that data from them. On the research side, the relevant research and resources that support each playbook topic are built in. These are usually at the end of each guide. The statements are in bold and they provide a brief overview of the related topics that got them into this guide to begin with. And they can be used for buy-in, they can be used for program advancement, budgetary support, lots of different options. And just there's a little example at the bottom of the screen here of what this might look like. And so you can see there's a hyperlinked research article and then a little summary. And then the bottom line is bolded because that is what prompted it to be added to one of our guides. And lastly, the custom results provide single resource links for easy prioritization. The results are emailed to you, and it indicates where you are at in the process and what you can do to advance your program implementation. And I'll get into the custom results a little bit later, but this is the basics of the custom results. So big one. Where does the playbook live? Couple different ways you can access it. You can go to humananimalsupportservices.org, and there is a little button that says the HOS Playbook right on the screen. And if you are not on our main page, you can also use the toolbar. So we have a resource center section of the toolbar. You'll just hover over it, and then a few down in our digital tools is the HOS Playbook. You'll click on that and it'll take it to the playbook landing page. So you can use the HOS Playbook in a couple different ways. The big one is completing self-assessments. So completing these self-assessments will give you those customized results, and it will also give you a complete PDF of that section, or you can download the playbook in its entirety by clicking the download the playbook button, and that gives you a complete PDF of the entire thing, every guide that we have. While you can do either, it actually is probably really impactful for you to do both, and we'll get into the specifics of each benefits on the next couple of slides. So if you decide to download the playbook in its entirety, there are 117 guides and toolkits included, over 300 pages of content. If you can see my little screen, I always love to show people this. This is what it looks like when printed. So it's a pretty big deal. It has an overview, a really comprehensive table of contents, acknowledgments for our collaborators, and ultimately is a really good way to reference all of the materials in one place and just keep in case you need to look at it later. So has a couple different benefits. Obviously, long-term use. If you print it or save the digitized version and use it as a reference at your organization, you can easily flip through to whichever topic you're interested in at that time, and you can use it in perpetuity. It's also flexible, so you can skip around across categories and topics with ease. The downside of doing it this way is you do not get those customized results based on what your organization is already doing. And so you will have to just skip around things that you are already doing well. And the self-assessments, which are a huge pride point for us, these custom program implementation efforts provide recommendations based on where you are at, where you want to prioritize. It skips things that you're already doing and has an option for not applicable if there's something that does not necessarily apply to your organization. And the benefits of these is it is by pathway, and we sometimes call them sections. You'll see them referenced here. And so on this right side, you can see the 5 different sections we have are foundations, the pet support services, lost pet reunification, supported self-rehoming, and intake to placement. And so you can start where you feel your priority is outright, and you can hop around to each different assessment as you'd like to prioritize different topics instead of having to reference the whole HOS playbook. And it's easy to delegate. So it's giving you options to support split teams in different departments, especially if you have one department that's primarily responsible for lost pet reunification, a different department that's responsible for pet support services. You can do them at the same time, and each of those departments have a little customized pathway for themselves to use. So to complete a self-assessment, you will click on the Take the Assessment button in that section. At the top, you'll see an overview that gives you kind of a description of what that section is. It has an option to load a saved quiz, save a quiz if you can't complete it in that time, which we'll get into in one of the next slides. And it looks a little bit like this. So it will have a question. If you're not exactly sure you understand what the question says, there's an option for expanded instructions that usually give just a little bit of extra detail to hopefully help answer everything. And it has the 3 different options based on where the happy medium where organizations might be. Some are advanced, some are just getting started. If you haven't started yet, you can select not yet started. And if it's not applicable, you can select that. This is just a zoomed in version because I know the first one was a little small. So this is an example of pet support materials being available in multiple languages. Are they? So you might say that pet support resources are available and accessible in multiple languages, most common to the jurisdiction. That's a pretty advanced method. All of your resources are available. Maybe only 50% are available. Maybe only 25% are available. Maybe you haven't started yet. There's not really a such thing as not applicable to this organization here, because I'm pretty sure every jurisdiction has multiple languages that exist within it, but that is an option here as well. So if you cannot complete the quiz during the sitting that you have started, there's an option to save it. And you can see there's a little template here. And so if you click Save Quiz, it will give you this really long code. And so we created a little template for you that you can download. So you can save that session ID and the date that you took it, so that when you come back to revisit this quiz at a time when you have the capability to do that, you can click Load Quiz, copy that session ID in there, and it will load all of your responses up until that point. So you do not have to sit down and do it all in one sitting. Most of the quizzes are really short. That's why we broke them up into sections in the way that we did. But we understand that sometimes you do need to take a break and step away for something else. This gives you the option to do that. And then when you complete the self-assessment, it will say, thank you for completing this. Please review your responses and associated guides, and it will give you an option to view that section of the playbook. So you will not see the whole thing, you will just see that topic. So in this example, we have pet support services off to the side, and you will have every single guide that is available in the pet support services section. Or you can reference the single guides in the results. And the single guides look a little bit like this. So it will have the question, the way that you answered it, and then it will have the associated resource. So if you selected a resource or selected an answer that's in the intermediate stage, it will say download relevant guide. And if you click on that, it will give you one standalone resource. And all of these results are emailed to you. So you don't have to look at this and remember it all at once. You can take it, prioritize based on what resources you were given, say these are what I want to focus on first, and skip around however makes sense for your organization. So from here, I'm just going to get into a few playbook highlights and a few of the details of these sections. So obviously, we have the 4 HOS pathways represented in the playbook. We also have foundations to support sustainable implementation, and the foundations aspect of this is really critical to completing the whole picture. And so you'll see in some of our next slides that the foundations include things like data foundations and marketing communication foundations, things that can support all of the pathways and can really support program implementation kind of holistically. And then we're going to talk about how the playbook can support your operations immediately right now, based on some tangible examples. So the first foundations highlight I wanted to do is in our organizational culture section. And so this scenario here, maybe a community member has experienced a sudden loss of housing. They are very panicked. They're trying to find temporary placement for their pets. They don't have to surrender. And that is a very stressful experience. I'm certain that for everyone working in the shelter, this is not a new experience, especially where housing related issues are kind of on the rise. And so a guide in our playbook that might be able to help with this situation is this trauma-informed care training, and being proactive about providing training. There are free options, for purchase options, how to track training efforts. Everything's in this guide so that you can provide proactive training to staff from a trauma-informed care approach, so that when these incredibly complex conversations with the public come up, staff and volunteers in public-facing roles feel like they have a good foundation to stand on to have those conversations. And so best to be prepared in all situations. This is a very proactive training approach. Our next foundations highlight is data. So while pulling data from monthly reports, maybe there's a sudden unexplainable spike in owner surrenders that does not align with what the expected intake percentages are. And that could be that someone new may have come on board and is just not necessarily entering the right data code. And that happens all the time. So making sure that there's a process that has clearly defined data points, the definitions, the purpose, you have an idea of how to deal with challenges that might come up in your data. The data foundation guides include animal records, intakes, outcomes, animal counts, person records, pet microchips, lost and found reports, foster operations, a pretty wide variety of topics in data tracking so that you have a lot of options on where to get started. So this foundation's highlight is about marketing communications. So this scenario is a program offered by your organization that offers free microchips once per month, doesn't get very many attendees. And that might just be that it's not communicated to the members of your community that really needs it. And so this marketing communications guide could help give you ideas on new channels to utilize, types of communication channels and the activities that might work best in them, messaging to internal audiences, messaging resources to external audiences, and then it also has templates to help get you started. Our next foundation's highlight is government communications. I did not include a scenario here because I think this one is standing on its own. This particular guide is about establishing contact with city and municipal liaisons. There are a lot of nuance with what you are and are not allowed to do as far as establishing that contact, but if you do have the opportunity to do that, it is such a valuable way to get your local officials involved with your organization and gain long-term support. So this foundation's guide has options for identifying liaisons, a sample outreach letter format. There is a supplemental guide linked in here that is a getting started guide for government communications, the rules for legislative engagement, connecting with state legislators, creating and presenting testimony. It has a lot of different topics involved, so you can kind of pick and choose what where you need to start. And we wanted to highlight a little bit of pet support services. And so this scenario is a community member is requesting a pet surrender. After some discussion, personnel discover that the person is experiencing difficulty affording food for their pet. That is really common. And so maybe what they need is more of a pet support lens and not an actual surrender. And so this guide has scripts and templates for how you might approach those topics with the public, some samples, messaging considerations in general about messaging pet support options, and the scripts have a few different samples of the most common pet support requests you get. That might be food, that might be crisis temporary housing. There's a lot of different options in here. For our lost pet reunification section, we wanted to highlight probably something everyone experiences, especially now, which is kennel space is almost past capacity and it's almost 4th of July. And what happens on 4th of July? Fireworks, loud noises, an increase in lost pets. And so we have a lost pet reunification guide for communicating to the community members how they can interact with the process of reuniting lost pets. And so that has sample community facing resources, tips and tricks, graphics, a texting program example, a program sample for short-term fostering or 48-hour holds of lost pets, because when lost pets get out, they're often found pretty close to where their home is. And so this guide has all kinds of different resources that you can use to communicate with the public how they can help in this process instead of having the pets come directly to the shelter. And for lost pet, we also wanted to highlight an intake related scenario. So a positive ID has been made on a pet that came in lost to the shelter. Their family wants to pick them up right away, but they can't afford the reclaim fee. And so this guide has options for establishing flexible reclaim fees or maybe no fees at all. You might have why establishing a flexible reclaim fee is necessary, some getting started tips, including some of the government communications aspect if there are limitations in that way. The getting started policy considerations, buy-in considerations, and then also a sample from an existing shelter that offers this type of programming. So if you have field services under the umbrella of things that you manage within animal services, for lost pets in particular, we also have a whole field services section that gives you an overview of how field services can be more proactive in the reunification of lost pets and improve community engagement overall. And so this guide in particular is about why to prioritize lost pet reunification in the field, how you can get started, including this return to owner checklist. So an easy guide to get started of assessments, if the pet has ID, checking lost and found reports, and getting started on follow-up processes. It also has a free training module linked in here and some supporting resources, including a webinar that was featuring Dr. Josh Fisher, excuse me. So in this supported self-rehoming scenario, a pet currently seeking to be rehomed is not getting very many interested adopters. And especially when you're in the rehome process, you've agreed to participate, to keep the pet out of this shelter. It's really hard to say how long that process might take. So any little thing that might help the process along is going to be really beneficial to community members in this scenario. So we have a guide about self-rehoming pet marketing, best practices for pet photos, best practices for writing a bio, how you can show pets in their best light, a little bit of considerations with AI bio writings. The new rescue writer just came out. So if you use some of these AI examples, they tend to make the process quite a bit faster. And not only can you share these resources with the public, but you can share them with volunteers or anyone in your organization that might be able to directly help with this process in writing bios for pets and helping them just gain that visibility so that the rehoming process can proceed. And then our last highlight is intake to placement. So in this scenario, a potential adopter begins to fill out a pet interest form, but stops when asked to confirm that they will participate in income verification and a home visit before adopting. Animal welfare in general sometimes has a lot of barriers, and we are in competition with the low barrier. Sometimes they just have to reach out once and they can get a pet the next day sorts of organizations. And so we need to make sure that we are not just reducing barriers that are unnecessary, but also reducing barriers to make sure that we find the most positive outcomes for pets. And so in this resource, we have why focus on removing barriers as an idea. They have a sample checklist where you can reduce certain barriers for interest forms. We have supporting research as to why reducing all of these barriers is beneficial, and then some quick start strategies to move that process forward. So in conclusion, this Human Animal Support Services playbook really lets you choose your own adventure. It's accessible in multiple formats. There are customized results, or you can view everything at once. The content covers a really wide variety of topics and gives organizations a place to start that can be adjusted based on current capacity, resources, organizational setup, etc. Resources were created through collaboration and supported by as much available data and research that we had. And with that, I ended earlier than I expected, so we have plenty of time. But if you have any questions, please feel free to get in touch with us. You can email HOS-project@americanpetsalive.org. That is generally me responding. So if you'd like to talk more about this, I would be happy to.
All right. Thank you, Eliza. That's such a great presentation packed with so much information. Um, wanted to start off with a couple of questions. Um, well, let me ask you this, Eliza, before we get to the audience questions. So have you in terms of the playbook, and uh, I'm, we've had people downloading it, and we've also had people that are already using it. Correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
What are some recommendations for those that, if you want to get the maximum optimal use for out of the playbook, um,
Yeah.
when you go through that process?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for the absolute maximum, most customized use, the self-assessments are the best way to go because then it will remove anything that you're already doing and you can get a really finite list of resources that could help you just improve operations overall. So I would always recommend the self-assessments just to do the custom result route. But everyone has a little bit of a different style of learning. And so if having the full playbook available to you and being able to just skip around and reference is best, obviously it's available.
And in terms of the what level of staff do you recommend is probably the talk to us about that, the different levels of staff and how they can use the playbook, whether it be the director or somebody who is new to the organization. Talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah. So the playbook is written in such a way to where it is obviously aimed towards program implementation. So to some degree, you should have some control over the implementation of a program, or you can utilize the playbook and the guides included to advocate for program changes because every different toolkit has the why behind it. It has supporting research whenever available, and you can use that from a space of advocating for these programs if you do not directly manage a department or are a director of a shelter. So really, it could be used in a lot of different ways. It has the step-by-step guides for implementation, or on the side of advocating for more community-oriented programs, it has a lot of supporting research that you can share.
Sweet. Well, let me ask one of the questions that from Robert Yeoman. Um, his question is there a comparable playbook on how to operate actual shelters in a humane way when many are operating over capacity? And his comment is we will always need physical shelters.
I'm not sure about a comparable playbook. I know there are a lot of resources out there, but as far as this playbook goes, it does take into account the fact that the capacity issue is so real. It's something that is facing so many organizations, and the purpose of 3 out of 4 of these programs, really all 4 of our pathways, is to try to find ways to reduce that capacity in a positive way. And so that might mean that people are rehoming pets themselves instead of surrendering. That might mean reuniting lost pets in the field so that they never actually have to physically come into the shelter. When it comes to things like intake to placement, foster programs are prioritized. So pets are generally housed in foster homes as opposed to the physical facility. And pet support services, of course, is really hinging on the fact that, people don't really want to have to surrender their pets. Sometimes they just hit hard times and they need some support to be able to keep them. And so while capacity is obviously always going to be a big consideration for this playbook in particular, it's trying to find positive ways to support the community and the organization to lessen that capacity so that your on-site space can be used for true emergencies, crisis situations, situations where a pet really does need to immediately come into a facility and hopefully finds a positive placement pathway soon after.
Nice. Well, and you being and obviously this was this playbook was years in the making, and we inherited it, and you inherited it from the from at least the beginnings of the project from prior human animal support services teams. Tell us a little bit about um, what your views are on what the playbook was intended to accomplish, and then also what you see as like the future for it.
Oh, that's a big question. So the playbook was intended to put everything that HASS was recommending, all of these community-oriented approaches that we were testing out through program implementation in one place that really had a comprehensive approach on all sides of what we were recommending, everywhere from the direct community support to the point of actual intake for a pet and pathway planning. And so the playbook was meant to be one comprehensive place that had everything so that you can take it and really use it as a model, the HOS model, if you will. And in the future, I'm hoping that we can just continue to develop this. So as HOS learns more, as we implement new programs, as we learn about innovative programs that you all are doing, as organizations and community advocates, to just keep expanding the content, making it better, making it work for even more organizations, including things that maybe we haven't thought about, and really making sure that it's a tool that can be used forever, and keep growing with the industry. This industry is always rapidly changing, and so the goal of this playbook is to change with it and make sure we are always making the best recommendations for people and pets.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, this playbook is something when I was the director of a shelter, I wish I had as a means to be able to do my own assessment and at least know areas in which I felt like I needed improvement and areas where I was strong before bringing in like a consultant. Having that awareness is so important. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And this is a way of getting consulting without having us be consultants. You can be your own consultant. You answer the questions the way that makes sense for your organization, and you know your organization best. So you can DIY it, fill out the self-assessments, get these custom recommendations, and prioritize the way that you think it needs to be prioritized for your organization.
Yeah. Well, and let me ask you a question. Well, we have a couple of technical questions from the audience. One is, who will fill out the self assessments?
Sure. So the self-assessments, while technically anybody could fill them out, they probably should be filled out by someone who is able to answer sort of broad strokes questions about the way that your operations are going in these different topics. So if you have a department that is explicitly responsible for pet support, that department might fill that section out. If you just have a couple of staff members and a bunch of volunteers, then maybe these are filled out by someone in a leadership role or volunteer that's really in the middle of programs of these topics. And so anyone that really understands where the organization is at in these spaces should fill out the self-assessment.
Nice. And then I have one more question from Dylan Moore. Um, Dylan's question is, are there report templates in the data section and or a best practices guide for managing data entry?
So there are quite a few best practice recommendations for both basic data entry and managing some of the problems that come up in data entry. And so there are a lot of data considerations in the foundation section, and then also in each individual pathway section. As far as report templates, not not necessarily report templates, just because we were being mindful of the fact that so many different organizations use different shelter software. They use sheets sometimes. Some people are still doing things on paper, so we didn't really templatize that aspect of it, but we do have a ton of basic data recommendations. Yeah.
Nice. All right. I think that ends audience questions. Um, did you have any final thoughts, Eliza, that you wanted to leave the audience with?
Yeah, I just want to say this playbook really was a labor of love, not just for me, but for all of the people who have been collaborators with HOS since the beginning. We had so many incredibly talented people in our working groups, people crowdsourcing resources in job alikes, a lot of really, really wonderful people involved in our pilot shelters, and just in general industry professionals who have come and spoken with us, who we have connected with over the years, and everything that they are doing and everything that they worked on really was to help make this playbook. And so I'm so appreciative of everyone that's been a collaborator on this project for so long. This really couldn't have existed without that. And I hope that everyone is able to access this today. And if you have questions, please feel free to reach out to us because I'm happy to talk about it. And if you have a resource that you think belongs in here, let me know because I can include it.
Nice. Yeah, thank you so much, Eliza. And just you all, I truly believe that this tool is something that you are going to be so happy that you were part of on the ground floor, part of that initial group that took it on, and um, the and it also, as Eliza said, we as a HOS team are more than happy to help you with some of the implementation and how do you understand the rubric and making your case to your government and to those who you report to as well, whether it be your supervisor or someone in city or county administration, because the idea is to look at is to have a dream, is use the rubric as the dream for what you want to see happen in your organization, and then also pat yourself on the back for the things that you are already doing well. All right, so with that, that ends our webinar. Thanks everybody for joining us tonight, especially you, Eliza. So happy and so honored to be working with you. And if we got to everybody's questions, but if you do have any more questions, please email us at hos-project@americanpetsalive.org. And then also as a reminder for tonight's webinar recording will be distributed within 3 days. The poll is now up. So let us know what your thoughts are on tonight's webinar. And then also remember, our next event will be on April 11th on the topic of using heat maps to make operational decisions. My team will share a registration link in the chat, plus keep an eye out for emails and more details. Thank you for being here tonight, and we will see you soon.